Welcome to another midweek edition of MissTrial, the podcast by three former prosecutors. I'm Friedman Agnifilo. This is Kathleen Rice and Danya Perry. We're three lawyers, three friends, three law partners, and three former prosecutors who bring a perspective to all things that are going on between law and politics that we love to bring to you each and every week because we do have unique backgrounds. In addition to being three former prosecutors, we have Kathleen Rice, who's a former member of Congress from New York, as well as a former elected district attorney in Long Island. It's Nassau County DA's office. I worked for the Manhattan DA's office and for the mayor of New York City for quite some time. And Danya was a former federal prosecutor and also investigated public corruption as part of the Moreland Commission. We've done all sorts of other things as well, but that's just the thumbnail sketch of what we have done in our background and why we like to talk about our perspective on all the things that are going on and bring it to you and discuss these really important times and important issues. This week, we are going to talk about three different topics. Project 2025 is looming in the background of all things involving Donald Trump. And so that's something we're going to start to dive in on each week that we think there's something relevant. In particular, this week, we're going to talk about what Project 2025 is talking about and wanting to do with respect to the Department of Justice, which will impact all federal prosecutions and investigations if they get their way. Why is that significant? Why is that important? It's essentially holding itself out as the blueprint for a right-wing MAGA administration if Donald Trump wins. He's trying to distance himself slightly from Project 2025, but don't let that fool you. Don't let his words fool you. Look at who he affiliates himself with. Look at the link and crossover between people involved and him. And it is so many things that they've predicted and talked about are already part of his campaign or coming to fruition, like abortion. That's one of their main things, is they're very anti-abortion, and we already see that playing out. So it's important to stay informed on Project 2025. So that's a topic we are going to keep bringing to you each week. We're also going to talk about new evidence that's emerging from the Jan 6 insurrection. And why is that important? It's important because the Jan 6th trial in federal court is starting to gear up again for getting ready to go to trial. It's going to be back on the calendar in, I think, a week, where Tanya Chutkan the judge is going to set a schedule for what's going to happen and tell us how she's going to analyze that case vis-a-vis the presidential immunity decision that the Supreme Court handed down on July 1st. So it's important to keep up to date on that too, because that case hopefully is still going, and certainly it's going to keep going unless and until Donald Trump dismisses it if he becomes president or pardons himself. That is going to keep going forward. So we're going to bring you up to date on what's happening there and some tape recordings that were recently released and what they show. Finally, the Manhattan DA's office, my old office, has submitted their response to Donald Trump's motion to set aside the verdict, his sweeping 34-count verdict, because of the presidential immunity decision. So we're going to talk about that, what it says, what they're asking for, and what will happen, and whether or not Donald Trump will be sentenced this September, finally, in his criminal conviction in the Manhattan DA's office. So those are the three topics we're going to talk about this week. I'm so excited to discuss them with you ladies. Happy to be here. And how you guys doing?
Great. Good. Yes. I'm on vacation right now. But I'm always happy to take an hour out and talk to you guys, especially about this incredibly critical stuff.
Well, Danya, since we also practice law together, and I know that
I've been on vacation because I've absconded.
That's what I was going to say. No idea you were on vacation because you're working full time on our law practice, and you're here as well. So
I'm doing it from out of the city, away from my kids, and actually kind of taken a little bit more of a breath. So it actually feels like a vacation.
You deserve it.
I got to see Kathleen over the weekend, so
yes.
I'm not complaining. Well, should we just dive right into it? Because there is so much to talk about today and always, and in particular with Project 2025, which has kind of taken America by storm, by quiet storm. It kind of crept up and kind of organically took hold in a way that I think has got a lot of people scratching their heads at a minimum, and screaming from the rafters at most. And for good reason, I think. So let's just set it up a little bit and talk about what Project 2025 is, and then we can get in the weeds. Today, I wanted to talk in particular about its prescriptions for the Department of Justice. But as you said, Karen, we should unpack it because it's a 922-page manifesto. It was meant to be a kind of gift-wrapped, bow-tied, as you called it, blueprint for the next Trump administration. Really, it's been a political gift, I think, for Democrats and independents and right-thinking people everywhere. So what it is it's a roadmap for what the second Trump administration would and should look like. A lot of conservatives were upset that they felt like the administration had been caught kind of flat-footed when they unexpectedly won the election in 2016 and came into office without really any policy, without the proper personnel, without a real agenda. And so they vowed that they wouldn't be caught flat-footed again, and that they would be ready to go with their MAGA agenda on day one. And so, spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation and joined by over 100 conservative groups, they set out to do exactly that, and to put together this massive, detailed blueprint. And it is fascinating. It's been out for some time, I believe for over a year, but I think it's taken a while for it to seep in exactly what this is. Maybe no one cracked it for some time, although I'm kidding because there was reporting on it. But what's interesting is that it does seem that it's, you listen to focus groups, you listen to polls, and you see that actually the American electorate is it's kind of a buzzword, and they're saying even though not everyone knows all of the details, right? Because few people are reading all 922 pages. It is clear that this is something that is of great interest and also causing great alarm, and I think with good reason. The director of the project, a guy named Paul Dans, has said things like this, and this is a quote. That was reported in the New York Times. What we're doing is systematically preparing to march into office to bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state. So you obviously have all this militaristic language, and as we talked about last week, kind of saying the quiet part out loud, by talking about weaponizing the next members of the administration. By the way, breaking news, Paul Dans, who was, again, the director of this project, was just relieved of his responsibilities. And I think that's because of the concern that his manifesto has been generating, and because of statements like that. Although, the president of the Heritage Foundation has made similar statements that, kind of ominously allude to political violence and the like. And he warned that the second American Revolution is coming, and he throws out this is ironic, but the olive branch, saying it will be bloodless unless the left it doesn't allow it to be. Essentially, it's not a direct quote, but that's the implication is if the left pulls back or pushes back rather, it will be bloody. So now to get back into it. So what
the translation is if we lose and we try to steal the election and you disturb us, it will be bloody. I mean, it's like a threat. It's disgusting.
It's a very overt threat. And this is the president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts. And, the Heritage Foundation, it's been around since the 1970s. It really started as like a Ronald Reagan vehicle. It's become magnified in the past years to the point, a lot of their communications are kind of in that like all caps font, and with the same kind of messaging that you see on Truth Social. They've just been 100% all in, and that kind of chin stroking, thought provoking, um, kind of commentary, is gone. And now it's just, it is this kind of threat, right? This American quote unquote revolution, and now I'm looking at the direct quote, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. And that's what you're getting from the president of this foundation.
Gaslighting. It's your fault. You
Yeah.
made me. I used to see that like in domestic violence cases.
Yeah. She made me do it.
You made me hit you.
Right. So here's what it does in broad strokes, this plan, which is self-styled also a quote mandate for leadership. That's what they say that it is. And what does it do? Exactly what Donald Trump has been asking for, and what, in large measure, the Supreme Court has now given to him. But it dramatically expands the power of the president, executive power, and it pulls in this kind of unitary executive idea that members of the Supreme Court are interested in, and a lot of these far right types have been pushing for. So that kind of permeates the entire document. And then on specifics, it cracks down on abortion rights, cracks down on LGBTQ rights, cracks down on diversity. It wants to militarize immigration enforcement. These are all kinds of things that have been mainstays of the MAGA agenda. This goes even further, though. This treatise. It would go so far as to get rid of the Department of Education, which actually is something that Trump has been saying, but now it's actually that it seems to have caught fire and people are realizing it, that this is what they're actually going to be pushing for. I think that's very scary and not mainstream. Nor is the following mainstream. It would criminalize pornography, and everywhere throughout the document you see different strands that would establish the primacy of kind of Christian, one woman, one man family, that would promote policies that encourage, and this is a quote, marriage, work, motherhood, fatherhood, and nuclear families. So everything that's about that traditional family, what that looks like, that is kind of the at the very, very core of this document. It would eliminate the term gender from every rule and regulation and order and piece of legislation. Their gender is gone, right? As are, of course, don't even talk about transgender rights, LGBTQ rights and the like. So that's stuff that is really out of touch with mainstream values. And I think that's why, this is really catching on, and that's not it. And we can talk about, the way it would remake the federal workforce, which would become completely political. So it gets rid of civil servants and these are all political appointees. I don't even know how that's possible. A, I don't think it's legal, but B, even practically, how do you, get rid of tens of thousands of experts in their field and make them, just political acolytes. It's stupid, and it's also probably unworkable, but that seems like it won't stop these guys who have written this gem. So, because it's so out of step, Trump has been trying to distance himself from it quite a bit. Not enough. I mean, he clearly is well aware of it. He's talked about some of the policies that he likes. To be fair, he's also said others without, of course, specifying what they are. He's called them abysmal. But he hasn't really been too vocal in terms of distancing himself, and that's probably because he really can't. I mean, not that wouldn't stop him from trying, but he's got scores of his trusted, members of his administration who are involved. I think CNN counted 240 of them. J.D. Vance, his new vice presidential pick, has written a foreword to a book by the head of the Heritage Foundation that aligns with all of this. And of course, a lot of it aligns with things that Trump has said and that he very clearly wants. And this kind of brings us to the discussion of the Department of Justice, because one of the things Trump has been agitating for, ever since he stepped into the office of the presidency, is to make DOJ his personal lawyers. He has always said, he wants them to be, anything but independent. He wants them to only answer to him and to, collaborate with him on his priorities and his agenda and to investigate his opponents. And that's what this document would do. So it's kind of, it's difficult and it beggars belief, I think, for him to try and move too far away from it. And I think it's far too late for that. So unless you guys have any comments or thoughts about the broader document, I think we can jump into chapter 17, which is the DOJ chapter.
So I just remember him saying, "My Attorney General." Yeah. It's like as if he was, it's just the way he talks about people who are supposed to be in positions of serving the public while being appointed by a president and approved by the Senate. It's just so ridiculous, the language that is used, but it's consistent with what you're talking about, Danya, with this whole, Project 2025. So I just want to throw my Attorney General, my this, my that.
That's right. And then when they displace
my military.
Right. Well, that's what this will do. They will make all of it his. And, gone will be any independent-minded, cabinet members or DOJ officials. In the last one we had, the Secretary of Defense had a very different ethos and set of principles and ideas than Trump did. Even his heads of the Department of Justice, right? He got rid of Sessions for the sin of having recused himself from the Russia investigation. He parted ways with Barr as well, right, over the insurrection. So, and the people who upheld the rule of law were people who then stepped in. They were Department of Justice officials, they were lawyers who said no, right? It was his White House counsel. It was the acting Attorney General. And those people who said, no, I'm not going to allow this letter to be sent to the Georgia legislature. I'm not going to let you do, X, Y, and Z. We could do a whole episode on that. Episodes have been done. So, that those people will be gone. And again, they're being very clear about it. So no one can say they didn't see this coming. Last week we talked about, I talked about a dog whistle and Karen corrected me and say, no, it's just a whistle now. Everyone can hear it. They're saying it. So that's the gift, is that people can become, sensitized to this and they can make their decisions about if this is the kind of Department of Justice, but also the kind of country that they want to live in. It will be unrecognizable. And I'm not trying to be overly alarmist. I think we call things out when we should, as we did with the Supreme Court decision on immunity, right? That is a game-changing decision. This would be, a game-changing restructuring of the entire federal government, right? It's not just, conservatives have long wanted to reduce the federal government. This isn't just dismantling pieces of it, like, parts of Health and Human Services or the Department of Education, which is unthinkable enough, but they want to remake and to use their words, weaponize other structures and institutions of government like the Department of Justice, which to me really is blood curdling. So, just to get into it so people can judge for themselves. And, I have some quotes in front of me because I don't want people to take our word for it. I think it's really important to hear exactly what the language is that is being used in this Project 2025 plan. So the section about the Department of Justice was written by a gentleman by the name of Gene Hamilton. He himself, we're talking about like overlap, 240 different touch points between Trump and this plan. He's one of them. He was a former senior official in the Trump administration. He's kind of all over the place. His name is all over the place because he's also the legal director of an organization called America First Legal, which really is just Trump's or MAGA's law firm. They just really essentially work for Trump. That organization is run by Stephen Miller, who we all know and don't like. One of the scariest people, I think, to ever have worked for Trump and to work for him again, no doubt. Stephen Miller, not a lawyer, but doesn't stop him from, issuing kind of edicts that are lawyerly. And so Hamilton is there, second in command at America First Legal. And the chapter starts with kind of a justification for the complete overhaul of DOJ. And it kind of seems like satire, but this is what these are the crazy reasons that they give. They say that Gene Hamilton, but really these, all of these would-be policymakers say that Department of Justice, among other things, did not investigate Hunter Biden's laptop enough. That's an actual justification. And they ginned up this is the quote, the Russian collusion hoax. So that's why, they say America doesn't trust DOJ and we need to completely overhaul it and make it a weaponized arm of the president. So there's 28 pages. I'll try and give you the highlight, but really what it does is it would turn DOJ into the enforcer of Trump's agenda across the government and even into local governments. So what they first want to do, and this is a quote, is ensure the assignment of sufficient political appointees throughout the department. So gone are the independent people. I mean, as you guys know, in the DA's office, a lot of people remain, right? A lot of the line ADAs, it's the same at U.S. attorneys' offices, and it's the same at many layers in the Department of Justice. No, that's going to be gone, as will, most civil servants in government. They will be replaced with political appointees because in the last time there were independent people, and Gene Hamilton and all of these folks writing this plan said that the people who were in place last time were not enough to, quote, stop bad things from happening to promote the president's agenda. So gone will be the independence of the Justice Department, which has been the norm, just through social mores, but also through regulation, internal and guidance from inside. That will be absolutely gone, and there will be no independent judgment, and there will be no kind of disagreement with the Trump agenda. And that's just not. That's just the fact. That is how this document reads. It says, quote, litigation decisions must be made consistent with the president's agenda, even though it recognizes that might make DOJ attorneys uncomfortable. They don't care. They're going to have to get comfortable or they're going to have to get out because that's the new agenda. It also says FBI has not been independent and it needs to become, a creature of the president's. They want to get rid of the director's 10-year term and hold him, quote, politically accountable to the president. So that's kind of, that's at the heart of it. They also, as I mentioned, they want to stretch, into local and state governments. They want to extend their priorities to those independent law enforcement agencies. And they go so far as to recommend initiating legal action, another quote, against local district attorneys who disagree with Trump's over-criminalization policies. That's my gloss, that they're over-criminalizing, but that is what, we'll talk about later, what this plan seeks to do. So, they're coming after Bragg, they're coming after Fani Willis, they're coming after anyone who thinks that they are not doing exactly what the president would like them to do. And given, the the political appointee who will be in place at the head of the DOJ and all layers of it, that will happen.
Talk about, Danya, you worked at the DOJ. How is that a departure from how things are done now? And what does that mean?
Yeah, it's night and day. I worked for, under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, and my day-to-day job did not change at all. We never saw politics enter into the discussion in terms of whether a case should be brought and investigated, whether it should be declined, whether it should be dismissed. It just did not happen. And we saw that Trump tried to do that in his first administration, and he had some success, right? He was able to get, he wanted to prosecute Jim Comey and others, and Barr and others wouldn't let him. But he did manage to get John Durham appointed, who had been the U.S. attorney in Connecticut, was brought in as special prosecutor to, quote, investigate the investigators, the people who had initiated the Russian investigation. And, Durham was able to bring 2 prosecutions, both of which resulted in acquittals. So that tells you the quality, the caliber of those investigations. But largely he was stopped. But and that's because, you read a book like that written by Jeff Berman, who was the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, where I came from. Trump tried to pressure him with respect to certain investigations, and he said no, right? And then, of course, he was forced to leave. So that's what happens typically, is that people stand up and they do the right thing and they do their jobs and they investigate the cases and decide on the law and the facts. But that will be different. And I can tell you from just anecdotally, because I have many, many friends at the Department of Justice, and a lot of people will leave, which is basically because they don't want to be consigned, to prosecuting or investigating, political cases. But a lot of those folks leaving is also going to be a problem. So it's kind of, it's if he wins a second term, I think the Department of Justice is going to be transformed, either way.
I just don't see how it works logistically. Look, as they say, justice is blind, right? It's about following the facts wherever they lead. You can't make up evidence, right? So it just makes no sense. Like, what do they think they're going to accomplish by doing this? And like, that's what I always say when they say, oh, they weaponized the cases against Donald Trump. No one made up the evidence. You know what I mean? Like, they investigated it and he broke the law and they brought the cases. So I just don't know how.
1,000% true. And a great point, right? Because we believe in the rule of law and we believe in an unbiased judiciary and in the power of a jury to hear a case fairly and to decide fairly. Having said that, the priorities of which cases an administration chooses to bring makes the difference, right? And so, look, I can tell you from where I'm sitting, and maybe you guys have had the same experience, but it was very common at Department of Justice. We didn't have a lot of cases that went to trial because it's just such a scary proposition. I'm now, a defense lawyer, as you guys are. And, you almost can't beat the government, certainly not the federal government. But when a defendant, right, let's say you have them on bank fraud, that's the charge. As you get closer to trial and it's clear they're going to go to trial, you really boil the ocean and you look at every single thing that, that defendant has ever touched. You look at your tax returns, you look at their mortgage applications, you talk to former employers, you really look at other bank accounts. I mean, and a lot of times, you find something. And so, will Donald Trump order the IRS to look at Michael Cohen's taxes in a second term? 100%. I'm betting they're going to be squeaky clean. But, I mentioned the Durham prosecutions. There were 2 individuals who were charged criminally by the Department of Justice and who had to go through, ruinous trials, right? It's ruinous financially, reputationally. They lost their jobs. It's devastating, even if you are acquitted and even if the justice system works. So it's still a terrifying proposition to have to go through that. And, it's not what the Department of Justice was made to do. So I agree with you. Like, ultimately, we all believe in the system. But, right now, I think in the last term, I believe Trump appointed 240 something judges. In the next term, they're now in place. Like, in the next term, you're also going to get some of his judges. So it's going to be, we've seen this with judges like Kathleen in Texas and Cannon in Florida. They shape very much what the jury is going to see. So even if a jury can decide something impartially and fairly, once something is shaped in a way that is highly prejudicial, that that is a real complicating factor and something we should worry about as well.
That's true. The judge situation is just a disaster, what that does. I mean, my God, you're right. And the thing that's just so surprising is I was a prosecutor for almost 30 years, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around it because it's just so different from everything we know in the world we know, that justice is blind and you bring cases without fear or favor. And to have a weaponized Department of Justice. I remember Preet Bharara, who was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. I remember when Donald Trump first was elected, Preet was so well respected and such an excellent United States attorney that Trump asked him to stay on, despite the fact that it's customary that when a new president gets elected, whatever party they are, all the U.S. attorneys, since they're all appointed by the president, hand in their resignation, and the president can either accept or reject it. And most of the time, if you're from a different party, most of those they put in their own people, right? But the Southern District of New York and Preet Bharara was so respected that Trump actually asked him to stay, and Preet did, thinking, okay, we can do this. And when Trump started calling him personally and asking him to do things, I think that's when Preet famously resigned, because he's like, I don't work for you. I work for the Constitution, right? Like that's my boss. So
no, what actually happened is he refused to do it, and then he got fired. But same thing. It was resistance, which doesn't.
I knew it was something like that. Were you there at the time, Danya? Was that?
I had left. I did work for Preet, and he was a fantastic U.S. attorney. And I left before he was fired. He tells the story, and then people who were there, he kind of walked out, and everyone was clapping for him on the way out. I mean, there are so many American heroes, that are kind of unsung. Jeff Berman was really another one, the U.S. attorney who came in, who was appointed by Trump. So many people who stood up and stood against this kind of very improper leaning in. But next time, I think he's just going to choose, different people as his U.S. attorneys and his heads of department, and we're not going to see so much resistance. Well, that is just a little introduction, a teaser. Well, we can get into it more, but I've taken up more than a third of the time, so I can pass the baton, and you guys can pick it up.
Let's take our first ad break. But before we do, because this is a great segue into our next segment, which is how how we have new evidence has come forward in a current Department of Justice case that Kathleen's going to talk about. But let's take our first break. This episode of MissTrial is brought to you by OneSkin. I love OneSkin. Everybody says to me they can't believe that I'm almost 58 years old and that I'm a grandmother and that I look much younger, which I appreciate very much. I attribute that to my skin, and part of my skincare routine is OneSkin. It's a great product. And since I started using it, people have been noticeably commenting on how good my skin looks. So I love it. I think it's great. I use it every single day after I wash my face. I use it actually twice a day. It's my go-to product, and it's just incredible. So I'm so thrilled that they're supporting today's episode of MissTrial. So, but if you have sensitive skin, or this is something that you are worried about adding to your skincare routine, I wouldn't worry about it. Give it a shot. It's scientifically proven, and it's free from all the bad chemicals and preservatives that can make skin red, irritated, or itchy. The product is very safe for sensitive skin, and it's just one of the reasons that it's earned the Skin Safe seal of approval. So it's fantastic. They also have a One Skin for your body. They also have One Skin that is has sunscreen in it. I use it all, and for a limited time, you can try One Skin for 15% off using the code MissTrial. That's MISS 2S trial, all one word, when you check out at oneskin.co. There's no com, there's no M at the end. It's ONESKIN.co. So give your skin the scientifically proven gentle care it deserves with One Skin. It's fantastic, and I think it is definitely worth doing. They have their own leading cutting-edge research and development platform, and it's an ingredient called OS1 peptide that the scientists have found reverses skin's biological age by reducing the number of sentient cells by up to 50%. So it's fantastic. It's scientifically based, and I say give it a try. So One Skin is the first skin longevity company, and by focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, it keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Get started today with 15% off using code MissTrial, MISSTRIAL, at oneskin.co. That's 15% off One Skin with this code MissTrial. If you go to oneskin.co after you purchase, they'll say where you heard about it. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This summer, do you want to enjoy hemp products but don't know where to get them? Are you in a state where it's not legally accessible? Had enough of overpriced dispensaries? Whether you're lounging under the sun or exploring new adventures, Via's premium hemp products are your perfect companion. They're farmed and crafted with care in the United States and trusted by over 500,000 customers. Via Hemp has a product for everyone. Their wide range of premium gummies covering all effects and strength ranges has you covered. Whether you're looking to set the mood in the bedroom or chill out after a long day, lab tested and certified, Via Hemp's products are sourced from the finest hemp for your peace of mind. Via is well known for the premium THCA flower grown indoors in state-of-the-art facilities and harvested at peak THCA levels to emphasize a natural aroma and flavor. The THCA flower strains are grown with care and rigorously tested to ensure the highest quality, free from harsh pesticides or nasty chemicals. And the best part? Via legally ships to all 50 states in discreet packaging directly to your door with worry-free guarantee. No medical card is required. So if you're 21 or over, check out our link in Via's website and in our description, and you can get 15% off. So you will, I think, like it if you try it, if this is your jam. Unlock the power of nature this summer with Via's organic and vegan hemp extracts, perfect for relaxation and rejuvenation. Via is the only lifestyle hemp brand. They use compounds found in hemp along with active plant extracts to create products, each with a specific effect in mind. Again, whether you want to get better sleep, ease anxiety, enhance your mood, or just feel a little something, Via is for you. They also have 0 THC products. If THC isn't for you, you can still take advantage of their CBD line. So their products range from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC, and these guys have you covered. They're an industry leader, over 500,000 customers served, made in the USA, and award-winning. They have quality ingredients, and they're affordable and accessible. So if you're 21 or over, check out the link in our description to VIA. Use the code MissTrial, that's with 2 S's, MissTrial, to receive 15% off after you purchased. They will ask you where you heard about them, and if you support our show, tell them we sent to you. Again, put MissTrial, MissTrial, to receive 15% off. We're back. Love our pro-democracy sponsors. They're fantastic, and we're so thrilled that they're sponsoring this podcast. Kathleen, why don't you talk about the new evidence that we have, that the Department of Justice is going to have to use, that Jack Smith, the special counsel, is going to have in the Jan 6 case when it goes to trial?
So, Danya, you ended what you were just talking about, Project 2025, with, us talking about Preet and how there are some people who do have backbones and stand up to power and actually do speak truth to power. And it's going to be interesting to see if Trump is reelected and he begins to institute Project 2025, how many members on the Republican side of my former colleagues in the House are actually going to back him up and help him implement Project 2025. So the new evidence was basically, ironically, we know about it because the Republicans, when the Jan 6 committee was created, they said that they were going to cooperate with it, and then they wanted to put election deniers on the actual committee. Kevin McCarthy was then the minority leader. And it turns out that there were only 2 Republicans left on the committee, Liz Cheney from Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger from Illinois. And they were 2 brave Republicans. But during this time, the 18 months that the committee was doing their investigation, the Republicans were talking about how they weren't letting the public see all of the evidence. They were cherry picking the things that looked best to make it seem so bad for Trump and all of his allies and his co-conspirators. And they came out with their report in July of 2022, and they recommended certain criminal charges against certain people, including Donald Trump. But it wasn't until recently, when the Republicans took over control of the House, where they said, now that we have control over all of this, we are going to release all of the footage, the thousands of hours of footage of recording in and around the Capitol in the days leading up to January 6th. And what was recently released, they actually caught on video. This is why you can't do any, just as a little piece of unsolicited legal advice, don't do anything in public. Just assume you're being recorded. So here we have Kenneth Chesebro.
This is released by the Republicans.
Yes. They released all of this. And they said, look at what they're trying to hide. And what we saw was a snippet of video from January 5th, the day before Jan 6th. And the people you saw were Kenneth Chesebro, who is like he was an outside advisor, for lack of a better term, who was responsible for writing memos as to how they can help overturn the election. His specialty was in the area of using fake electors. And so he had written 3 memos about how that could be successful in certain states, specifically Michigan and Wisconsin. Now, during the time that the committee was in session and they were doing their investigation, he was subpoenaed by the committee, Chesebro was, and he came before the committee and he was asked where he was the first week in January, specifically on January 5th, January 6th. And he took the 5th, I assume on the advice of counsel, but now that we have this video, we understand why he took the 5th, because he was seen on the tape with one of Donald Trump's election attorneys. They were concerned that the fake elector sheets that they had mailed to the Capitol were not going to get there before January 6th. So this attorney by the name of Brown got on a plane and met Chesebro in Washington, flew to Washington on January 5th, met Chesebro, gave him the envelopes like this, you couldn't, it's like deep throat. So slipped him the envelopes that contained the fake electors from Michigan and Wisconsin. And they then walk off together, and you see them handing these envelopes to 2 people who were later identified as aides to Representative Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania. Now, the significance of Mike Kelly was back in the day, everyone knew that he was an election denier. He was a real Trump person. But no one at that time was aware of or had any specific information about the level of his involvement in this one aspect of what the Trump team was doing. It wasn't just the putting together a sheet of, fake electors. It was the pressure campaign that was put on legislatures not to certify, the delegates and not to certify the election and send those on to Washington. It was the pressure campaign on AGs. It was the pressure that he tried to put on to seize all the election voting machines. There were so many aspects to the election interference case. The fake elector scheme was just one of them. So that's where Chesebro was involved. But the significance of seeing two members of Representative Mike Kelly's staff actually accepting the envelopes, we now know what happened. And this involves another elected official by the name of Senator Ron Johnson. He came into office after defeating Democrat Russ Feingold in the state of Wisconsin. And he is a well-known election denier. And he had stated that his chief of staff was in touch with Mike Kelly's chief of staff. And Senator Johnson was going to act as the conduit for the fake electors from Michigan and Wisconsin. Now, let me just take you back. One little kind of very important piece here is that after the aides were seen taking the envelopes of the fake electors, you then see them going into the Capitol. They went to the office of the Senate parliamentarian, attempted to give the envelopes over to the parliamentarian, and they were rejected by the parliamentarian. They were not accepted. You then see them kind of wandering around the Capitol, seemingly waiting for instructions as to what to do next. And then they just returned back to Mike Kelly's office. So back in 2022, when Ron Johnson came out and said, Mike Kelly's office actually did contact me and asked me to be the conduit to the vice president's office, the goal here was to get into the hands of Mike Pence, the vice president, who was going to be overseeing the election certification, the fake elector list from Michigan and Wisconsin. And at every turn, whether it was the Senate parliamentarian who rejected it or Mike Pence's staff who said, do not bring them to the office, the vice president will not accept them. Those were two of those kind of people who acted as a bulwark to the actual overturning of a legitimate election. And now, what's going to happen? So to me, the big question is, and there was a lot of talk about this because I was, again, as we've spoken about before, I was serving in Congress on January 6th. And there were a lot of Republicans who felt like I did, that this was an assault on our democracy and that, people could have died. I mean, members, specifically Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi could have, met a very different fate than they did that day. And, it was kind of after that, they ended up some of them still ended up objecting to the election results. But at the end of the day, they're still in their positions, and no one has really uncovered the extent to which certain sitting members of Congress actually did more than just talk publicly about this is a rigged election, but they actually aided and abetted the scheme writ large. And so how is this going to impact the DC case? Chesebro is a unnamed co-conspirator. Of course, everyone is reading the tea leaves and figuring out who these are, but he is one of the unnamed co-conspirators. But this is clearly a unimpeachable piece of evidence that shows that that part of this scheme was to get those fake electors to the vice president before January 6th. And as far as I know, look, Mike Kelly, where is he now? He's still representing his piece of Western Pennsylvania in the House. Not only that, but he's a member of the House Admin Committee, which is a very powerful committee in the House. And he is also chairing the investigation into the attempted assassination of President Trump. So there has been no accountability outwardly for any people like Mike Kelly, like Ron Johnson, who took part, without question, took part in trying to put forth fake electors to prevent the certification of the election. And as we know, this case, I believe, is going before Judge Chutkan again this week. And she's been kind of ordered by the Supreme Court to figure out how to define an official act, a non-official act. So this new information certainly will be something that Jack Smith is going to look at, but the extent to which any, elected officials like Mike Kelly, I mean, most people say there's no way that a chief of staff has the authority to act on their own without the imprimatur and the encouragement and the approval of their principal. So this is kind of like let's wait and see what happens, but it's certainly it's an added little, tidbit to this case that is going to not likely be settled before Election Day, but certainly is going to be a significant piece of it.
Well, you're right. It is this week. I can't believe August is on Friday.
I know, we're already in August.
I'm like, oh yeah, August. That's next week. I'm like, it's this week. God, you're right. Where did the time go? It's crazy.
No idea. Yeah.
Yeah, what's really significant about this evidence, and I love how you broke it down and described it and really explained it and kind of what it means. But what I love about this evidence that came out is that the immunity decision really has made so much of that case kind of, it's not going to go forward, right? He's immune for some of that case. But the part that's really not going to be official conduct at all, and that's really going to be the crux of that case, is going to be the states and fake elector certificates. And here we have them on video, as you said, sort of, delivering the goods and everything that people are describing. There's, as a prosecutor, there's nothing better than evidence on video, because then it's no longer a he said, she said, right?
No,
That's
not
right.
at all. No. And also, one thing that I didn't mention, Chesebro already pled guilty. He was indicted in the Georgia case. He already pled guilty. He was the first one he demanded a speedy trial. They were about to go to trial. He pled guilty. He's cooperating. He got his sentence. He knows what his sentence is going to be. And I do believe that he's also recently indicted in Wisconsin. He's cooperating with prosecutors in, I believe, so Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, I believe Nevada. I mean, this is someone who was at the very heart. They call him the architect of the fake elector scheme. He did memo after memo after memo to, perpetuate this as a legitimate form of objecting to the election results. And now that he is on the side of the prosecutors, it's going to be very interesting to see who else maybe, is held to account.
That's so true. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's just, it's just the irony that this evidence of the one part of the case that, of course, if this goes to trial, right, if he wins, then he'll dismiss the case under his weaponized Department of Justice or pardon himself. But assuming he doesn't win, now that we have Kamala and whoever her running mate's going to be, hopefully if that happens, this is the part of the case that will survive. And now that the irony that was released by the Republicans who are like, they're hiding stuff, they're only releasing the best stuff. Well, P.S., they didn't only release the best stuff, because this is really good. So
but Jack Smith must have had that, right? I assume, if not believe, that he subpoenaed all that stuff and they would have had to turn that. So, but he's, prosecutors don't share their best bits of evidence usually with the general population. So he may have had it, but now we know.
Now we know. And, look, it's important for the public to know that even though, look, when I represented the 4th District in New York, I represented my constituents, but I behaved as if I represented every single American in this country, because that's what you are as an elected official. You try to do the best thing for everyone throughout the country, not just your own constituents. So it's important that people understand what a representative from Western Pennsylvania was doing, what one of the senators of only one of two senators in the state of Wisconsin was doing to try to overthrow the election, legitimately run election. It's just astounding. And the public should know this stuff. And I just think that it's a delicious irony that it was made public because the Republicans were trying to kind of get it at Democrats by claiming that they were hiding information that would have been beneficial to Donald Trump and the Republican position that this was just another day at the office in the Capitol.
It's so appalling that they can take that. It's just appalling.
Your segue.
Wow.
Immunity decision.
Unbelievable. Segue. Great segue. Speaking of the immunity decision, exactly.
Because it is speaking of these days. Can't stop talking about it.
No, but it's speaking of the immunity decision, the case, the in addition to the case being the federal case being impacted, the New York State case is also impacted, where he was convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records. And what has happened this week is the Manhattan DA filed their reply brief to Trump's motion to set aside the verdict based on presidential immunity. So just to remind everybody where we are, Trump was supposed to be sentenced in July for his conviction, but then July 1st came around and the Supreme Court issued their sweeping immunity decision that not only covered official acts, but it also covered you can't use evidence of official acts evidence to prosecute unofficial acts, if that makes any sense. So they carved out a privilege, essentially. So the question is, how does that impact the Manhattan DA case? Because it wasn't the law at the time the trial went, right? This case didn't exist at that time. So this new rule was not applied. And so Trump filed a motion to set aside the verdict, saying, I want my verdict set aside. I want a new trial. I want the case dismissed because they used all this evidence against me that was should be privileged. Interestingly, they didn't really make the argument that the conduct, that in other words, that it was core or official conduct, because it wasn't, right? This was all private, and this was using his private lawyer to basically facilitate a hush money payment that they then hid the books and records. They obfuscated what it was about, called it legal fees, in order to not have to declare it to the election officials when he was running for president. And so they're not saying that conduct is official, because clearly it's not. What they're saying is, and what they said was, but the evidence that was used to prosecute me was privileged based on this new immunity decision. And what Judge Merchan has done is he says, basically, I want to make that decision before I sentence you and put the sentence over till September. Now, the difference between the analysis Judge Merchan will do here and the analysis Danya Chutkan has to do in Washington, D.C. is Judge Chutkan doesn't have a full record developed the way Judge Merchan does, because he had a trial. So, Danya, you had mentioned, which I thought was such a brilliant idea, and that now everybody's talking about, which is that Judge Chutkan will basically hold a hearing, which will serve as a mini trial, and that the world will see the evidence. So we'll see if she does that. I hope she does. And in some ways, it'll be like having a trial, even though there won't be a trial before the election in that case, it looks like. But we'll see. She's going to give us a schedule, et cetera. But what Judge Merchan did was say, essentially, he doesn't need to do that same thing because he had a trial where witnesses were put on, witnesses were cross-examined, so he can look at that record and make that analysis himself. And so Trump did his argument, and the reply brief came about, and that was what was filed this week. It's 60-something pages by the Manhattan DA's office, and their argument is essentially as follows, because again, it's about certain pieces of evidence, right? It's about certain tweets that they used at trial for their Twitter account, and where they used where Trump is arguing, but that was a White House account, right? So that's official, right? That's an official act, and communicating with the public is an official act. So that should not have been permitted. And Hope Hicks and Madeline Westerhout, his administrative assistant, and Hope Hicks, who worked for the campaign, but then later was his communications director at the White House. You talked about, she testified about privileged conversations at the White House between her and the president, and that shouldn't have been allowed. And same thing with some, I think, communications with Michael Cohen. So his testimony, the evidence that Trump challenged and wants precluded is his tweets, Hope Hicks' testimony. There was a form from the Office of Government Ethics that was introduced at trial that like, that's official, right? The Office of Governmental Ethics. Same with Madeline Westerhout's testimony. Cohen's testimony about the Federal Election Commission's investigations, and Cohen's testimony about investigations by Congress and prosecutors. Those are what they're saying, that Trump is saying that was inappropriate, and therefore the verdict should be set aside. And with the Manhattan DA's office, they did, I think, a really good job analyzing each piece of evidence and really showing three things. Number one, that Trump waived that argument way back when he moved to remove the case to federal court. If you remember, he said when the case first came about, he tried to do a removal to federal court, which is essentially saying I was the president at the time, and so this is a federal question, should be in federal court, and by doing, you have to make a certain showing to get it removed. You have to show that a federal question is involved and that you have a colorable federal defense. And Donald Trump failed. He didn't raise presidential immunity, or he raised it but then withdrew it there. So so he waived presidential immunity there, and the judge there, it was Judge Kaplan, I think. It was Judge Kaplan, and he basically held that this was personal conduct. This was not presidential conduct that was waived. Right there, that's one argument. A second argument is that they're going to say is again, you didn't preserve it at this trial. So that's one bucket of arguments that they're going to make. The other argument that the Manhattan DA's office made, I think that is that, look, this wasn't official. This was all private, right? This was not everything you do when you're president is just because you are president. Not everything you do while you're president is official. This was conduct that you did when you were a candidate. Had nothing to do with president, and just because some of this carried over into your presidency, it was still related to personal things, right, in your personal life. And so I think that's going to be a second analysis. And then the third is, even if the third thing they say is, even if some of it, not all of it, but some of it is problematic, it's harmless error. And, harmless error analysis is something in the law that the judge will look at carefully. There's one piece of evidence that I think the judge is really going to look at closely, and that's Hope Hicks's testimony when she was in the White House. I think that's the most problematic, frankly, of all. And whether or not that's in or out, it is what it is. What really, I was in the courtroom when Hope Hicks testified. It was quite powerful when she was talking about how Donald Trump came to her in, I think it was April of 2017, and that's when the Stormy Daniels stuff came out finally, and Trump said to her, "I'm glad it didn't come out before the election," and she broke down in tears on the witness stand because it was so powerful. It felt like she knew she had just sunk him, because that's what they had to establish, that this was election related, right? That was really important to make this a felony. It's not just falsifying business records. It had to be, election related. And so as she said it, her voice cracked and she broke down into tears. It was very powerful. It's like she knew that she just sunk him. And that's incredibly powerful evidence. And what reason that concerns me is, in summation, Josh Steinglass said, basically, you don't have to believe Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen has credibility issues. There's so much evidence aside from Michael Cohen that corroborates him. So I don't know. It's hard to harmless error.
Devastating, and
exactly
called it powerful. And there's something that resonates about Trump's arguments that, there was a purpose for him to talk to her as an official act, right? He wants to craft the message that goes out to the American people, like at least notionally. And so it wasn't just, this unofficial act, this personal act. It was really like, the stuff is coming out. How do we message this to the American people? There's some force to that. It's just a question, I think, of whether the judge finds it to be official, obviously in the first instance, and even if so, whether, as you say, it was harmless, because there was that mountain of other evidence. That's what the government said. That's what Danny said, in their papers, that, this stuff talking about that's in contest is just a tiny sliver in a mountain of evidence. And that is what Steinglass said in his closing statement, right? It was a sliver. And so that a judge could be well within their rights to find that that's harmless error, if it's error at all.
I think he will. I think this will be okay. I think he'll find it to be harmless error. I do think, though, and we've said this before, that when sentencing happens in September, when the sentencing happens in September, I think he's going to stay it. I think he'll press pause on it pending appeal, because this is a tricky question, and it is appellate. So yeah, it's there's so much going on. It's so fascinating, and we got to stay on top of it. We got to keep the pressure, and we got to stay informed. We got to people got to get out and vote. We can't get complacent here just because it's summer and things might not be going on very much in the legal world. It very much is, and it's very important. And so I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this every week. Danya, the fact that you're on vacation is crazy to me. And that I talk to you every day, and we're doing work together every day, and I had no idea you were on vacation. I just but please, I'm going to teach you at some point how to go on a real vacation.
I'd love to learn. After the election.
Yeah, exactly.
On holiday together.
Anyway, it's great to see you guys. Another great episode with you, and really so appreciate our audience and all the feedback people give us, and that they come here each week and join us on another episode of MissTrial. So great to see you, ladies.
Thank you, guys.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the Midas Touch newsletter at MidasTouch.com/newsletter.